Welcome back to making a fursuit from scratch. Hi, I'm Waffles, and in this series we're going step by step, piece by piece, as we build our very own plush fursuit together. In the first couple episodes we went ahead and finished this head. In the last couple episodes we went ahead and finished the bodysuit. And in this episode we finished one of the last few remaining pieces we need, and that's going to be our hand paw. Before we get into the nitty-gritty fursuit making action, I have a question for you, YouTube chat. Have you subscribed yet? I do a lot of really cool furry and fursuit related content on this channel, and I would be really sad if you guys didn't see the finale where we finally put together a fursuit. We're really close of going on this journey together of building a fursuit, and it'd be a shame if you missed it. Now, let's go back to making a fursuit where we build ourselves some paws from scratch. So I want to take a quick second and talk about the pattern we're using to make our hand paws. The first thing that I want to draw your attention to is that it's not symmetrical. I see a lot of fursuit makers that make paws that have basically four of the same identical finger, and I don't think it looks very good. Instead, we're having four unique fingers with their own shape, giving us a distinct thumb and then three separate fingers. With that, it'll be a lot more work, but I think the overall effect will be a lot cooler. So the first thing that we need to do to really get this project going is to go ahead and cut out all of these pieces and get the fur shape down. Once we do that, we can go ahead, sew it together, and then that'll act as a really good base for the rest of the pieces that we need to attach to our hand paws. While doing this, I've learned that making hand paws is a lot harder than I expected. I don't know why I do this every time, but making fursuits is really hard. After we've cut out all of our pieces, this is how it's looking, and if you ask me, it's actually pretty good. There's still a little bit of trimming and editing we need to do just to get the pieces to line a bit together more, but I think for a kind of rough paw, it's starting to look really good. The next thing that we're gonna have to do is get all of our edges next together and pin together so that we can sew it all up. Don't be a fool like me and make sure you add seam allowance to your pieces. I didn't here, and that's gonna mean that I'm gonna have to hand sew all of this together as opposed to just throwing it on the sewing machine and zipping it all up. So after spending a few minutes getting all of our pieces pinned together and nice and neat, I've gone ahead and created this. These pieces, once we've sewn them together, will act as a really good base for our hand paws. So we're basically gonna build everything off of this guy here. Now, before we get too distracted, let's talk about the next step where we're going to go ahead and give our hand paws some pads. Making the pads for your hands is a lot easier than you think. Start by drawing out the pads on your sheet and then cut them into their individual pattern pieces. Now that we've gotten everything cut out, we just go ahead and trace it onto our hand paw. There's actually a little trick you can do here too, where you only really need to draw two fingers and then you can just flip them over to get the other two. Now we can attach our hands to the back of a sheet of felt and then pin it all in place. Now here's the trick. Use your sewing machine to trace that line you just created on the back of your palm. Once you've finished tracing your outline with your sewing machine, flip it over and you can really start to see what the paw is going to look like. Now, all you gotta do is very carefully cut out the extra felt with an X-Acto knife, and then behold, you'll have uncovered your beans. So, if you ask me, I think our hand paws are looking really good. We got the pads attached to the palms. But, as you know, that's only actually half the battle. We still have to do the whole other side of the hand paw so that we can stitch them together, finishing our hand paws. The next step that we gotta take when looking at the remaining pieces, we have the claws, we have the fingers, the palms, and then the wrist. The palm and the wrist are basically free. We already have the pattern pieces, we just gotta cut them out again. The claws are gonna be pretty tricky, and then the fingers seem like the last big piece we need to get before things can really start to fall into place. The way we're gonna make our fingers is we're gonna go ahead and use upholstery foam. This is just like a scrap piece I have laying around, and then carve out our fingers, or at least rough foam shapes of them. Remember, if you can carve it in foam, you can wrap it with duct tape, and then if you can wrap it in duct tape, you can basically get a free pattern to match up any two pieces you want. So I think that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go ahead, carve up some foam, and get some pattern pieces made for our fingers, and with that, we can go ahead and start to wrap things up for our hand paws. Using duct tape, we will create a pattern used to cut out the fur for our fingers. Always remember when you're cutting apart your tape that your pieces need to lay flat. If you don't, they won't work when they go back together. I don't know about you, YouTube chat, but cutting out fur is honestly one of my favorite parts of making a fursuit. It's just really satisfying. Now, let's go ahead and put together this giant Lego set. As you can see, we have a ton of pieces cut out for our hand. Here's the remaining wrist, and then there's the back of the paw. The next step is to actually start putting this together. The first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna attach the tips of our paws, these guys here, to the outside of the fingers. Because remember, we're using this piece here as just kind of a giant base to put everything on. It's going to be pinned up all like this right here. Some of these pieces we made are a little bit oversized, and that's actually okay. It's always easier to take away material as it is to add. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead, pin everything together, get it all sewn up, and then come back to you with these pieces here just to see how it's looking. If you want to know why this video is taking so long for me to make, I'll tell you what, I make a lot of mistakes making these paws, especially as a newer fursuit maker. This piece here attached to the finger is upside down and needs to be removed and then replaced and then sewn all back together, and that takes a lot of time. I'll tell you what, YouTube chat, I'm gonna go ahead, fix this guy, and then add the remaining little top pieces to the fingers, and then we can come back together and then start to talk about the top of the palm and the back piece here. Once we get that all done, we can finally start to talk about adding claws to our paws. After an afternoon of sewing, I've gone ahead and attached the fingers to the hand. So we have all the fingers done now, and it's starting to really come together. Like I alluded to in the last segment, the next big piece that we need to do is attach the back of the hand. And we have this piece right here, which is the exact same as the front palm here. What we need to do next is get everything pinned together. So I've gone ahead and pinned it all together. Sew the in-between segments of the fingers, and then just get it all connected nice and neat. I do a little bit of trimming on these pieces here just to make sure they fit nice and good before getting it all sewn together. But it's gonna be the last thing that we need to do before we can start talking about making the claws next. Claws are a lot easier than they look. Just make sure not to sew them shut. Because you'll need so many of them, you'll start to feel like a fursuit claw making factory, but it's a lot of fun once you get into a rhythm. One thing about making claws is that they're a really good test of your sewing skills. Because there's so many of them, any mistakes you make will stand out like a sore thumb. It takes a lot of skill to make something nice and make something consistent too. Now that we've gone ahead and finished all of our claws, we can attach them to our hand paws. The way we're going to do that is first cutting a slit in each of the tips of our fingers, making sure that the claws, when poked through, all line up correctly. Then just using the sewing machine to quickly kind of sew them together. It looks a lot harder than it actually is. With just a little bit of thread, these claws will never go anywhere. And finally, we can go ahead and attach the last piece we didn't attach initially, which is the back of the wrist. It's the big long brown guy. With that, we can sew it together and finally have all the major pieces finished for our hand paws. With our claws attached to our paws, we can go ahead and say we finished all the sewing we'll need for this project. That means there's only one thing left to do, and that's to turn our paws inside out. I don't know about you, I'm really excited to try these on and just see how they look. A lot of hard work went into making them, and man, I'm really excited to see it. Let's see how they turned out. Ooh, check it out, YouTube chat. How do you like these paws? Personally, I'm really excited about how these hand paws turned out, even if they are just a little scuffed around the edges. These sewing for the pads, I didn't do quite that perfect of a good job, but nonetheless, it is one more thing finished we needed to do to finally finish our full plush bodysuit. Now, that reminds me, let's check out how these paws look attached to the full bodysuit. It's gonna look really cool. Overall, I'm really happy with how these paws turned out. That blue fur adds such a good pop of color. One thing I would do differently is next time while doing the sewing for the Paw Pads, I'd go a lot slower. Your mistakes will be really obvious and it's super hard to fix, but it's super satisfying once you get it right. If you're interested in seeing this full fursuit completed, make sure you subscribe. The next video will be us completing the feet paws, which don't expect anytime soon because I know it's gonna take a long time, but it'll be the last video needed to fully complete our fursuit from scratch. From very start to very end, it'll be super satisfying seeing this whole project come together. Now, if you could please hit that like button, it helps out these videos a ton in the algorithm. I thank you so much for doing that. So with all that being said, I thank you guys so much and I can't wait to see you guys again soon.